Arc Raiders just launched, and I spent a couple of hours testing the starter attachments that you can craft from the beginning. I have noticed that people often ignore the attachments, and I have a feeling that that is due to most not knowing the impact that they can have. So today I'm showing what each attachment does and how it changes the recoil and or spread on the starter weapons. By the end of this video, I will leave you with a simple priority framework for what to craft first and why, so that you can carry it forward as you unlock more weapons, level up those weapons, and you unlock higher tier attachments. Before we start, I want to mention that when a weapon has a magazine slot, I do treat the larger magazine as the baseline that you should always put on before using any other attachments. That is because extra rounds are often the biggest early improvement that can immediately win you fights. Everything else that I cover is layered under that. Lastly, for each weapon and attachment, I will be standing 10 meters away from the wall in the practice range, and I'll be showing the default level 1 weapon side by side with that same weapon equipped with the attachments that we're testing. Now let's begin. First up is the Pharaoh, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It is a break action rifle, so you have to reload after every shot. Recoil and spread modifiers do not change a single shot in a meaningful way. It will always hit the center. And to show you this, I will put it side by side at 10 meters with and without all of the attachments so that you can see how the grouping is exactly the same. Next is the Hairpin. It is a slide action weapon with an integrated suppressor. This means that you have to wait to cycle the action before each shot. The only slot here is a magazine upgrade, so that's all there really is to say about it. But now that I have mentioned the beginner weapons that are not affected, now we can move on to the ones that are. That leaves the Kettle, the Rattler, and the Stitcher. So let's take a look at how attachments change their behavior. First, let's take a look at the Kettle. It is a semi-automatic weapon with a 20-round magazine, and it fires as quickly as you can tap the trigger, so recoil and spread build up quickly after the first few shots. That is why the most essential early game attachment for the Kettle is the Compensator 1. It reduces the per shot dispersion by 20% and it lowers the max shot dispersion by 10%, which keeps your spread from getting out of control when you're spamming. The good to have attachment for the Kettle is the stable stock. It reduces the recoil recovery time and the dispersion recovery time by 20% in practice, and by the time that I press the trigger again, the sight has already settled that much quicker, so the whole string of bullets stays way more consistent. The whole idea here is that your crosshairs will reset faster in between shots. A nice to have for the Kettle is the Vertical Grip 1, because surprisingly enough, it has a decent amount of recoil, although it's semi-automatic. When you're tapping as fast as possible, that 20% less vertical recoil is a huge deal, and the Kettle doesn't deviate horizontally that much. Next, let's take a look at the Rattler. It is a fully automatic weapon, and once you get to around the 9th or the 10th shot, the spread ramps up by a huge amount. Therefore, I find that the most essential early game attachment for the Rattler is the Compensator 1. As we know, it reduces the per shot dispersion by 20% and it lowers the max shot dispersion by 10%, which helps a lot in keeping all of your rounds in the intended area while you're spraying. The Angled Grip 1 is also a good to have attachment due to the vertical recoil being extremely easy to control for this gun, but horizontally it is a bit more random, so it is a good idea to minimize it by the 20% that it reduces the horizontal recoil. And the stable stock is the last in the priority list for the Rattler because it only really helps when you're not shooting by reducing the recoil recovery time and the dispersion recovery time by 20%. And I say this is the last priority because it is not often that you actually need to do fast enough bursts where the recoil will matter. Lastly, let's take a look at the Stitcher. It is fully automatic with a 20-round magazine, and the pattern zigzags more than it really climbs. It has a gnarly recoil, which makes the Muzzle Brake 1 the most essential early game attachment for the Stitcher. It cuts vertical and horizontal recoil by 15%, which you can immediately feel since it won't be zigzagging as much. Due to that horizontal zigzagging, I also think that the Angled Grip 1 is essential on the Stitcher since it drops the horizontal recoil by 20%. This combination means that you will have a much easier weapon to control, and it doesn't have naturally high spread, so there's no reason to use the Compensator. You will have a much easier time tracking people without the camera shaking everywhere. The stable stock one is a nice to have if you have an extra one laying around, but I really would not craft it since it just reduces the dispersion recovery time and the recoil recovery time by 20%, and this is not the type of weapon that you would actually be bursting with very much. Now before we wrap it up, here's the frame framework that you can carry into higher tier weapons. I'm sure that you have noticed a pattern here. You want to match the attachment to the firing style. If it has to be cocked every single time, then most likely attachments rarely change the weapon's behavior. If it is semi-automatic, then the recovery matters because there's a small time frame in between each shot for the gun to settle. If it is fully automatic, then you want to watch the camera shake as a simple recoil indicator. If the recoil feels easy, then reduce the total spread and how fast it builds up. And if it is hard to hold on the target, then prioritize the recoil reduction first. Given all of that, the magazine upgrade is still the biggest fight winner on any weapon with a magazine slot because you reload less than your opponents. So the magazine takes priority over everything else, and that is what you should craft first if you have a magazine slot on your weapon. I've been enjoying Arc Raiders and I will be covering it as I find more interesting or timely information, so stay tuned. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you topside. I will out.